think he did, yeah.
So it's a fair statement to say Detective Peeler was trying to help you, isn't that correct?
If I talked, yeah.
And it's also fair to say that you were willing to tell Detective Peeler whatever he wanted to hear, isn't that correct?
My side of the story, sure.
So you were willing to give lies to Detective Peeler in order to tell them what you wanted to hear, isn't that correct?
I just didn't want to get in trouble.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect at this time, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution would like to call Detective Carrie Peeler to the stand.
Consider yourself sworn, sir.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor?
Please.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Detective Carrie Peeler, and I am a detective for the Cranberry Shores Police Department.
Detective Peeler, allow me to direct you to the evening of August 30th, 2013. Do you remember what you were doing on this day?
Yes, I was making my usual rounds in my police cruiser when at 21:45 hours I received a call from dispatch about a medic emergency at 1111 Ocean Drive.
Did you know whose house this was, Detective Peeler?
Yes, it was Miss Jordan Abrams' house.
How did you know Miss Jordan Abrams?
Well, Miss Abrams and I had a few encounters in a few years before this incident occurred. She had made a couple of calls about some minor graffiti that I handled about a year or so before August 30th.
So let's go back to that evening on August 30th. Did you respond to the call that you received?
I responded to the call immediately, and I arrived at the residence 5 minutes later.
And when you arrived, did you notice anything?
Yes, it was quite odd when I pulled up because the house was dark. Looked like there was nothing going on inside, nothing that I could see. And there was also no car parked out front, though I later learned that Miss Abrams' car was parked in the garage. And when I approached the front door, I noticed there was a little red sticker.
Objection, Your Honor. So this answer has become a narrative.
Response?
Your Honor, I believe the witness has just finished his answer. We'll move on to the next point.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What was the significance of this red sticker?
Well, after Hurricane Sandy, there were a number of houses that were deemed unfit for occupancy by the construction department because they were severely damaged and were deemed unsafe. So any house that had a red sticker meant that you could not legally live there. You needed a green sticker in order to be living inside your house.
So after you noticed all of this, what did you proceed to do next?
Well, I was walking towards the front door, and without knocking, without ringing the doorbell or anything like that, the door swung open, and I was face to face with Miss Jordan Abrams. And she was startled to see me. She was stepping outside the door, and she also had a black backpack slung over her shoulder.
What did Miss Abrams do when she saw you?
Well, she definitely didn't say anything. She just looked at me all puzzled, and then she went back inside the house, whereupon I followed her.
Once you entered the house, did you notice anything?
Yes, I came face to face with Miss Abrams' two children, Remy and Jada, at which point Remy excitedly shouted that Pavano had been shot.
After you heard this, what was your next move?
Well, I was taken aback because I was initially responding to a medical emergency. Nonetheless, I drew my firearm and called for backup, as I usually would, and then I asked which Pavano had been shot, and Remy said it was Chris.
So what immediately happened after that?
I then asked who had shot Pavano, and that was the first time Miss Abrams said anything that night. She said, if I remember correctly, I shot him, I caught him and his gang breaking into my house.
So after you learned this, what was the next step that you conducted?
Well, I did what I would usually do, according to protocol. I aimed my weapon at Miss Abrams in order to drop her bag, raise her arms, and then I performed a pat-down on her, for my safety as well as everyone else, as well as the safety for everyone else in the house. Excuse me.
And after you did this, did anything else happen that evening?
Well, immediately after my pat-down, I asked if there was anyone else inside the residency. And at that point, I heard a voice coming from the living room in the back of the house that said, I'm here, and Chris is on the floor. I later determined this to be the voice of Mr. Lord Lucas.
So did you enter the living room that evening?
Yes, I immediately entered the living room after hearing Mr. Lucas, taking Miss Abrams and her two children with me, whereupon I found Mr. Pavano's body lying dead on the floor and Miss Candace Abrams sitting upright in a chair.
And what happened once you had entered the living room?
Well, almost immediately after I entered the living room, that's when Detective Jerry Singer and the additional EMTs arrived. This allowed me to investigate the residency.
So, did you discover anything on your further investigation?
Yes, I did. I went to Miss Jordan Ames's room, where I found an open box of 9mm full metal jacket bullets, some of which were missing from the case, as well as a taser on her dresser.
And did you discover anything else on your further investigation?
I did notice that when I was walking on the second floor balcony, that if you looked over the railing, you could see everything clearly in the living room with all the lights on as the place was lit up. And I also noticed, as I descended down the staircase, 2 9mm full metal jacket shell casings.
So was that the end of your night, Detective Peeler?
No, I still had plenty of work to do, as after I conducted my investigation, or my sweep of the house, I returned to police headquarters and individually interviewed Jordan Abrams, Remy Abrams, and Mr. Lauren Lucas.
Let's talk about that interview with Miss Abrams. Did anything interesting happen in that interview?
Yes, Miss Jordan Abrams contradicted herself on 2 separate occasions regarding her Glock 17 pistol. And she also was misinformed and said some false
Objection,
things
Your Honor,
about...
this is a mischaracterization of my client.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that Detective Peeler is not mischaracterizing Miss Abrams in any way. He's just simply stating what happened inside that interview.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Would you like to continue with your answer?
Miss Abrams contradicted herself about the gun twice during the interview, and she also mentioned some information about her taser, which I later determined to be false.
So, let's talk about that first contradiction. What specifically was it?
I asked Miss Abrams if, when she went down to Cranberry Shores, if she removed the firing pin of her Glock 17 in accordance with New Jersey state law. One point during the interview she said that she did. However, at another point she said that she had never touched the gun, as it was new.
What about that second contradiction? What was that specifically?
Well, again, Miss Abrams kept on saying that the Glock 17 was new. It was new. However, at the scene I recovered a receipt for the Glock 17 which said that it was a year old.
Objection, Your Honor, I fail to see the relevance of this question.
Response?
Your Honor, this simply goes to possession of a firearm for an unlawful purpose, one of the charges in today's case. Therefore, I believe it is relevant.
And also to credibility maybe, since you're talking about contradictions.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please continue with your answer.
Yes, as I was saying, she said that the gun was new and during the interview. However, I recovered a receipt that stated that the gun had been bought well over a year ago.
Thank you, Detective Peeler. No further questions at this time.
Cross,
Yes, Your Honor, permission to proceed?
please.
Good afternoon, Detective Peeler.
Good afternoon, counsel.
No, yes or no, you supported the Safe and Doing program, correct?
If you're referring to the program a couple of years ago, yes, I did support the construction of the dunes.
And you were also aware that my client, Jordan Abrams, was against this?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And you were also against the changes that Jordan Abrams wanted to make to her house in Cranberry Shores, correct?
Yes, as it used to belong to Simon Sewell.
And you were aware of protests in front of her house that year, correct?
Yes, there were 1 or 2 pickets organized in front of Miss Abrams' house against the changes.
And yes or no, were you at these?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Response?
I'm alluding to the bias that Detective Peeler has against my client.
May you repeat the question?
Yes. Yes or no, please. Were you at these protests?
Only at one, and I was just watching.
And yes or no, please. Were you off duty?
Yes, I was.
Thank you. Now, the mayor of Cranberry Shores is Chris Pavano's mother, is it not?
Yes.
And the mayor is your boss, is she not?
As she is the mayor of the town, she is the boss, yes.
So that makes Chris Pavano's mother your boss, correct?
Yes, counsel, as I just stated, Miss Pavano, Chris Pavano's mother, is my boss.
Yes, so all of this combined together gives you a serious grudge against my client, Jordan Abrams, does it not?
No, counsel, in no way do I have a grudge against Miss Jordan Abrams. Whatever she does to her house, that's her business. And the fact that Miss Pavano's mother, or Mr. Pavano's mother is my boss, excuse me, has no bias towards Miss Abrams.
Okay, and nevertheless, you found yourself arriving at her house at 9:50 p.m. on the night of August 30th, correct?
As I received a call from dispatch at 21:45 hours. Yes.
And you were the first police officer on the scene, correct?
Yes, I was the first responder.
Okay, thank you. And
Objection, attorney testifying. May I be heard, Your Honor?
Sure.
To the statement of, okay, thank you, by counsel.
Response.
Your Honor, I don't see the harm in saying okay, thank you. All right, now, you said in your direct that the first thing that Jordan Abrams said to you was, quote, "I shot him," correct?
Followed by, I caught him and his gang breaking into my house. That him being Chris Pavano.
You don't happen to recall her saying, "Friendlies don't shoot" before then?
No, she didn't say that at any point during the night.
Okay, Your Honor, I would like to approach the witness with what has been previously marked as D1B, Peeler's interview with Jordan Abrams.
You have a page in line.
Somewhere in here, yes, I do.
Yeah, Cloud.
Yes, okay, line 435, page 64. The record reflect, I am showing opposing counsel.
Just make sure this is the document as a whole.
I have the beginning pages of it over here.
Just as long as there's a signature on the back.
Oh, yeah, signatures in that section.
Okay. No objections at this time, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Could you please read along silently as I read aloud? Answer from Jordan Abrams. "I didn't just lift my hands. I said to you, 'Friendlies, don't shoot.'" To which you replied, "True." Did I read that correctly?
Objection,
Yes.
improper impeachment, Your Honor. May I be heard?
Yes.
The answer on line 47, or the question posed by Detective Peeler, was not read incomplete. I asked that it be read for the benefit of the court.
Okay, so you're just asking for completeness as opposed to improper.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Read this.
True, but what made you think I would shoot you? Did I read that correctly? Yes or no, please?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. So, would you like to change your answer there, that "I shot him" was the first thing you heard?
No, that was the first thing I heard. Looking back on it, if I may, I don't remember her saying anything like that.
I asked
That
yes or
slipped
no
my
question.
mind.
Thank you. Now, after Detective Singer had arrived, you investigated the upstairs of the house, yes or no?
After going to the living room and...
Yes or no, please?
I was just explaining myself. Yes, I went up.
And for the benefit of the jury, this means you ascended the staircase? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, and yet it was only on your way down the staircase that you noticed the bullet casings lying on the stairs. Is that true?
Yes, that is correct.
So you walked right by them to begin with, without even noticing them. Is that true?
That is correct.
All right. Now, when you got to Jordan Abrams' bedroom, you found a taser on the dresser. Is that correct?
Along with an open box of 9mm shells.
Yes. And as a police officer, you know how tasers work. Is that correct?
Of course.
And you know that tasers can only fire one shot, correct?
Actually, that's not true, counsel. There are some tasers that can fire multiple shots. Miss Abrams happened to have one of the lesser quality tasers that can only fire one shot.
Yes. So that is to say, that kind of taser can only be used on one person, correct?
The specific type of taser Miss Abrams had, yes, it's a non-lethal weapon that could be used on one person.
I see. Now, later that night, it came to your attention that there had been 4 total trespassers in the house, correct?
I later did learn that there were 4 total teenagers, yes.
And despite that, despite Chris's death, you only interviewed 1 of the trespassers, correct?
Yes, as the other 2 requested counsel, and I was unable to interview them.
So this means that Lauren Lucas's account is the only account from that side of the night, correct?
From which side are you referring to, counsel?
From the prosecution side, the only eyewitness account.
Yes, but there are also the accounts of Miss Abrams and her daughter.
Yes, but there is no other trespasser, be it Gray Michaels or Dorian Campbell, to corroborate Lucas's testimony, correct?
1 minute.
No, as I was unable to interview them.
So we don't really know for sure if Lauren Lucas's testimony was accurate, do we?
He seems like a pretty straight fellow. I'd take his word for it.
All right, no further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Your excuse, sir. Thank you. Next witness, please.
At this time, Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call Detective Jerry Singer.
Okay. Type procedure, you can consider yourself sworn, please. Thank you. You may proceed.
Could you introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Jerry Singer. I'm the sole detective of the Metropolitan County Prosecutor's Office.
Prior to that job, did you hold any other positions?
I served as a police officer for the Cranberry Shores Police Department for 10 years and was later assigned to the Detective Bureau, where I worked for 8 years.
Could you explain your educational background, Detective Singer?
I received my Bachelor's of Arts in Criminal Justice in 1995 from the University of Pennsylvania.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to offer Detective Jerry Singer as an expert in the fields of crime scene investigation and firearms identification pursuant to Stipulation 15.
No objections, Your Honor.
Proceed.
What's your connection to today's case, Detective Singer?
On the night of August 30th, 2013, I was called to investigate. From this investigation, I formed my conclusions.
For your investigation, did you feel that you had sufficient facts and data to complete your investigation?
I feel I had more than enough. I used the affidavits, depositions, and police questionings, along with the evidence I personally collected and the tests I personally conducted.
And throughout your investigation, did you reliably use principles and methods?
I always keep up to industry standard.
How did you use them in today's case?
I performed 2 tests, the first on the Glock 17 and the second on GSR.
You mentioned that you formed 2 conclusions. What were they?
The first, that the bullet was fired from the 9th step. And the second, that Jordan Abrams had no right to use deadly force.
Let's start with that first conclusion about where Miss Abrams fired from that night. What did you use that helped you lead up to that conclusion?
I used the location of the bullet casings, along with the test I performed with the Glock 17.
Where were those shell casings located?
They were located on the far left of the 9th step.
How do you know that?
When the bullet is fired from a gun, the bullet casings fall.
You mentioned a test on that Glock 17. How did you perform that test?
I created an accurate simulation of the night and the surroundings of Jordan Abrams and copied his stances as he told me, and I fired the Glock 17.
What exactly were you testing for?
I was testing to see the bullet trajectory.
What did you find in that test?
I found that 80% of the bullets fell to the left, neither forward or backwards, and the other 20% fell directly under the gun or to the right, but not forwards.
Let's move on to your second conclusion. What evidence helped you lead up to that conclusion?
I used the words of Jordan Abrams as Detective Peeler entered the house, along with the lack of any verbal or physical threats, and the GSR test.
What did Miss Abrams say to Detective Peeler when he answered?
She said that Chris Pavano and my gang were breaking into my house, but nothing about any threats being made.
So, were there any threats made on that night?
There were no verbal or physical threats made. In fact, Chris Pavano was several feet away from Candace Abrams.
How do you know how far Chris Pavano was?
Well, I created an accurate diagram in which I used the evidence I collected and the statements of the witnesses.
Would you recognize a copy of that diagram if I showed it to you?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I'll be approaching the witness with what has been previously marked as Exhibit S1. Let the record reflect that as shown to the counsel.
No objections, Your Honor.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that document?
It is the diagram I created.
Could you, for the benefit of the jury, show or explain how far Chris Pavano was from the chair as you noted in the diagram?
Jordan Abrams was several feet away from the chair.
Permission to retrieve the document, Your Honor?
I'm sorry, say it again, please.
Permission to retrieve the document.
Yes.
And finally, you mentioned a GSR test. What is GSR?
GSR is also known as gunshot residue, or the nitrates that are ejected from a gun after shooting it. They're most commonly found on the hands of the shooter.
Did you find any GSR on the hands of Miss Abrams?
No, it was quite odd. There was none on the hands. I found out later that she'd washed them off immediately after shooting.
How did you test to see if it was on Miss Abrams' hands?
I applied adhesive discs to the hands and found there was none.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Charles,
Yes, Your Honor. Commissioner Receipt.
please.
Good afternoon, Detective Singer. It is true that, like Detective Peeler, you were for the Save the Dunes program, correct?
I was for the Save the Dunes program.
And like Detective Peeler, you were aware that Jordan Abrams opposed it, correct?
Objection on irrelevance.
Your Honor, once again, I am alluding to the bias that Detective Singer has against my client, Jordan Abrams.
May it be heard, Your Honor?
Sure.
There is, this case is not about what happened between Detective Singer, Detective Peeler, and Miss Abrams. This case is about what happened between Miss Abrams and Chris Bavano on the night of the shooting.
I think, counsel, though, that any person on cross can show by a civil witness whatever it is in terms of relevance.
So, yes or no, this difference between the two of you made her an enemy, didn't it?
It did not.
I see. Now, you stated on direct that you were the sole detective for the Metropolitan County Prosecutor's Office, is that correct?
That's my job.
And you are always on call, is that true?
As a sole detective, I have to be.
So that means you handle all cases that come into the office, correct?
I do.
So it's safe to say you have a lot of work, don't you?
It depends when, but I guess you could say at times, yes.
And you always have to be, quote, extremely careful, isn't that true?
Of course.
So, with so many cases, it must be difficult to sustain this level of carefulness, correct?
Well, at the time, I only had this case.
But in general, it's fair to say you're overworked, aren't you?
I wouldn't say that.
I see. Now, on the night of the incident, August 30th, you received a call to go to the Abrams residence at 9:30, correct?
Yes.
And you arrived at 9:45,
Yes, I just woken up and had to drive there.
and you arrived after Detective Peeler, correct?
He was the first responder.
I see. Now, you say in your statement that at 9:30 you received a call to go to the crime scene. Is that true?
I did say that.
So, at 9:30 you knew it was a crime scene?
That is what they told me.
So, you knew it was more than a medical emergency at that time?
That is what dispatch told me.
So that means somebody did call 911, didn't they?
Dispatch told me. I had no idea who had called 911.
So really, there must have been more than just a medical alert button pressed in that case, correct?
I have no idea if there was a medical alert pressed at that time. All I know is that dispatch had called me.
I see. Now, when you arrived at the Abrams residence, you began your investigation, correct?
Correct.
And you said